Hi everyone, long time no see. I can't actually remember the last time I sat down and made a video, but it seems like ages and ages ago. So I thought I would pop on and say hello just to remind you that I'm still here, I still exist, and also because I think this might be the last opportunity I have before the new year arrives, before I can sit down and make another video. Can you believe that it's nearly New Year already? I am kind of a bit staggered. And also not at all organised for Christmas and the ensuing festivities, but no matter, we'll get there in the end, I'm sure. And also I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to reflect a little bit on the year gone by, particularly in terms of the depth year idea that I and various others have been sharing on YouTube and in other places, and also participating in or attempting to participate in with varying levels of success. And what's beginning to happen now, of course, is that people are reflecting on their depth year experience and are talking about whether they're going to be going into a depth year in 2020. So I thought it would be quite a good opportunity for me to do a bit of the same and to reflect with you where I've been and where I think I'm going, and where I think the channel will be going in the new year. So maybe the best place to start actually would be to say something about why it has been so long since I was on. And it's not really for any particular single reason. In all honesty, it's been a couple of different things that have worked together. I'll say a little bit more shortly about the characteristics of this year for me. But I think it's probably worth sharing with you at this point that one of the reasons I haven't been on is the background of everything is kind of very busy at the moment, and has been all year, partly because we've been doing house renovations, which I know I mention every time I'm on camera. We're doing these house renovations and it's taking up all my time and they never seem to end. But they have made some significant progress in the last few weeks. We now have a fully double glazed house, having had a fully single glazed house for however long we've lived here, which is amazing. And already we're noticing the difference. So it's just in time for the winter. The difference in the warmth of the house and the air quality of the house, because it's not so damp, etc., is just phenomenal. Unfortunately, we did have a bit of a problem with the actual fitting process, or rather with the fitters who were doing the double glazing fitting, because although the windows themselves are great and we got there in the end, I and my partner basically had to micromanage the process in the end because they were kind of not managing it properly themselves. So things were being started and not finished, and some windows were in but weren't complete, and then other windows were going in, and then doors were delayed, and goodness knows, all kinds of things happened that resulted in several letters being written, and having to march down to the offices of the double glazing firm and basically having to read the riot act. And it worked. We got there in the end, but it was all very stressful and very time consuming, and that kind of took up a lot of my time. And what I was finding really was that I wasn't in the mood for making videos. I wasn't in the right frame of mind for making videos. And if I'm honest, I think I was probably actually feeling a bit burned out from all the work I had been doing on the videos that I did last year, because I did a number of different series last year, which I thoroughly enjoyed doing, and really got a lot out of, but also put a huge amount into, in terms of research and time and editing and figuring out the structure of the series and how I'd fit them together. And actually it was quite an interesting experience. It has been an interesting experience for me to reflect on how I approach this whole YouTube community and video making thing, and it's going to really kind of help me in my thinking for the year ahead. Because what's become apparent to me is that having a bit of distance from it has been really useful, because it's allowed me to kind of look back on my habits and practices in terms of my video making, and has kind of uncovered for me some of the assumptions that I was working to, very unconsciously, but they were there. Things like I had to do a certain number of videos, I couldn't leave too much of a gap in between videos. If I started a series, then I needed to make sure that the episodes of that series were coming out not just regularly but fairly frequently, otherwise people would lose interest or wouldn't enjoy it, etc., etc. And actually, of course, I realise now, looking back, I can see that a lot of the things that were driving me and were making me at times feel a bit kind of stressed about doing the videos or getting the videos done properly, were completely in my own perception. It wasn't like somebody was actually standing over me with a gun saying, "Do the next video." I mean, a number of you, I'm very pleased to say, would be in touch with me in between videos saying, "We're looking forward to the next video, and we hope that the next video will be soon." And that's great. I didn't in any way feel that was undue pressure. The pressure was on me, was from me, and was to do with my own perceptions of how I should be doing this channel. So that was an interesting learning from last year, or from this year that is just passing. And that's a learning I'll be taking forward into the next year. And in terms of depth year itself, two things to say there. One is, yes, I am going to do depth year again. I'm going to say a bit about how I'm going to do that shortly, but it's going to be slightly different to how I characterised it for this year, mainly because my experience of depth year this year, although very interesting and very positive overall, I wouldn't say was entirely successful. Certainly not in terms of the criteria that I set myself, because I set myself the criteria of I'll be buying no new books and no new decks unless they are of a particular interest to me and are necessary for me going in depth into a subject that I'm really trying to study and learn about in depth. And the truth is, I partially succeeded there. So my spending on decks and books this year, I wouldn't say was overly excessive, and certainly was a lot less than it had been the year before. And it's true that some of this spending was on material that I actually dropped into pretty deeply and used as an area of study for myself. But that wasn't entirely the case. So I did find myself still sometimes buying things on impulse, or buying things that I thought I would go into in depth, and then by the time they arrived, discovering that I'd lost interest and wanted to move on to something else. So it wasn't entirely successful on its own terms, but nonetheless I did get a lot out of the process of even considering the depth here, because what it made me aware of and much more conscious of was the motivation behind some of the spending and the rationale for some of the spending. And when I say spending, I just mean acquiring things. I don't mean that the process of spending money on decks and so on itself was wrong or a problem. I just mean that process of acquiring decks and books, it made me more aware of doing it, and made me more conscious of why I was doing it, and made me recognise that sometimes I was doing it still because of that slight feeling of, well, this might be handy at some point, or maybe I'll get into this at some point. And there was sometimes a couple of occasions where it was good old FOMO, fear of missing out. Getting a deck or a book that I thought, oh, it's the thing that people are talking about, I better get it. What I found was that towards the end of the year, and again, this might be something to do with why I wasn't so active and haven't been so active in recent weeks, is I actually was beginning to find myself feeling very disillusioned with that aspect of the kind of online tarot, YouTube, metaphysical, spiritual community, that thing of having to be part of the discussion about the hot new deck. And so actually I haven't bought any hot new decks in a while, and in fact found myself recoiling from some of the online conversations about some of the hot new decks, which I'm not going to name because I don't want to offend anyone, and I don't want to get into a big discussion about some of the controversial topics that have been discussed ad infinitum and ad nauseum online already. Just to say that I found myself feeling a little bit like more conscious of the loop that we can get into of getting onto the treadmill of trying to have the latest and hot topic new deck, and getting kind of pulled into that online discussion. Let me say, by the way, at this point very clearly that I am not in any way, and would not in any way, criticize anyone who has a hobby of collecting decks or just enjoys getting decks. So I am not feeling in any way kind of judgmental about people who do want to buy the hot new deck or any other deck. I don't fall into the camp of thinking one is better than the other. I think it's all horses for courses. So, it's what you're into. Are you interested in collecting lots of decks? Are you just interested in seeing what the latest new deck is, giving it a go, and that's enough for you? If you decide to buy every new deck that's on the market, so what? That's entirely your prerogative. And if you decide not to buy any of them, then that's fine too. Neither of those things makes you any more or less of a tarotist. So this is just about me reflecting on what I learned. So I found myself towards the end of the year thinking, I really don't want to feel enticed into the latest new thing, and to some extent I want to go a little bit back to basics. And so I've found myself, in kind of to my surprise, in recent weeks being really fascinated with older tarot decks, something I hadn't really thought I would get into. So the whole kind of Marseille and Visconti, Sforza tradition of decks, and Solabusca and all that kind of stuff, which previously I obviously was aware of and I knew about their historical significance and all of that, but didn't really have much of an interest in them. I found myself being drawn to them quite powerfully, and not specifically in terms of wanting to have them, so not thinking I want to own every version of Marseille that's out there, but thinking more that I want to understand more about where they came from and how other decks evolved from them and what they evolved from, etc., etc. So that's been in my mind, and that actually will form part of what I'm going to be talking about for the year ahead as well. So that's been kind of interesting. So the depth year in terms of the actual buying of books and decks, partially successful, mainly not successful though. And therefore this year, as I go into the depth year, I'm going in with a slightly different motivation, and with different criteria. So I'm not going to be thinking quite so much in terms of I need to not spend a certain amount of money on decks, or I need to not buy as many decks and books. I'm actually just going to think in terms of I want depth year 2020 to be depth as in more detailed courses of study for me. And if that means in order to do that I need to acquire several books and decks, that's going to be okay, because it will be in furtherance of dropping more deeply and consciously into a particular course of study. One of those courses of study for me in the year ahead is going to be the history of tarot, because that kind of back to basics urge led me to thinking that it might be quite fun for me, because that I've said it before on the channel, I learn by doing, and to some extent I learn by sharing. So wouldn't it be fun for me to delve into the history of tarot and share that with you? So that's one of the things I'll be doing in the new year. I plan to do in the new year, is to look at the history of tarot, to discuss the history of tarot, to share historically significant decks with you, some of which I will probably either own or will buy, some of which I might not buy. I might just use online images to illustrate, but certainly using that kind of that thread, the thread of the history of tarot, where tarot evolved from, the way that tarot was influenced, and where it has got to, and where it's going. All of that is something I want to explore. So that's going to be a series. And maybe I should just say a little bit about what my plans are for the channel in the year ahead, because the thing I'm going to be very conscious of is I don't want to overreach myself in terms of trying to do too much with the channel and commit to too much. And one of the ways that I could commit to too much is to say I've got an idea for about 5 different series, because I have, and I'm going to do them all. I will do them all, but rather than kind of announce them as separate series, I think I'm going to see it more as a bit like threads that weave through my channel's content in the year ahead. So some of the ideas I've had for that, I would like to do more observance of the Wheel of the Year, the Celtic Wheel of the Year, or the Pagan Wheel of the Year, however you want to describe it, and to do it in a way that allows me to observe that cycle and to honour that cycle, and that allows me also to weave in information that is about the kind of festivals that other spiritual traditions observe, and to draw comparisons and linkages between them. So that's one idea that I've had, and of course that could be very neatly set by the point of the Wheel of the Year in which I am here in the northern hemisphere of the world. So at the moment we are in autumn time, heading towards winter, heading towards midwinter, at the middle part of this month, or the end part of this month, and so there'll be something there that I can follow, a thread that I can follow that will be easily set for me by where I am in time. So that's one idea. I've mentioned the history of tarot idea. I also would be interested in picking up not so much the series that I did before, the awareness inquiries, although I'm conscious that I kind of left that one hanging. That was meant to be a series, or was a series, looking at kind of mystical traditions, really. And I would like to go into that in a bit more depth, but not so much as a continuation of that series, which originally I thought, well, I'll do a bit about different traditions and learn about different mystics and teach. I'm thinking actually more about doing something that's rather more experiential, and looking at how I, and you, if you want to join me, can create and observe and follow a mystical practice. So a meditative practice, and a self-inquiry practice, and a contemplative practice, which I think would fit really well actually with the Wheel of the Year idea, and with the history of tarot idea, of course, because tarot can be a fantastic contemplative tool. So a kind of mystical journey series, or a thread for the channel, is something I'm thinking of, and that also chimes with an idea I've had for quite a long time, and that I'm very keen to share with you here, and that is the idea of self-directed spirituality. So for me, that's about looking at what is it that all these different spiritual and mystical traditions are saying to us and are trying to achieve, and is there something that they can all teach us, and is there something that is accessible to us all that goes beyond any single tradition, including what we might perceive as the more kind of free and inclusive traditions like paganism. Is there something that is even more fundamental than even that? And that is not in any way meant as a criticism of paganism or any other tradition. It's simply to say that all traditions, of course, if we're not careful, can turn into dogma. So what is it that they're all saying and trying to teach us, and is it something that we can explore for ourselves? So a thread on self-directed spirituality is something else I've had an idea around. Probably I will, well, definitely I will still be doing tarot deck reviews and walkthroughs, but I'm not going to be aiming to do some of what I had done in the past, which is to do the thing of, oh, there's a new deck coming along, I'll try and get a copy of that and do a walkthrough as early as possible. It's going to be more about what are the decks that are of interest to me and what are the decks that are relevant to me in some of the threads that I'm discussing. So if, for example, I am up to a particular point in my history of tarot, then is there an interesting Marseille deck that I can share with you that would help illustrate where we are in the history of tarot? Or could we look at the Visconti Sforzas and the different versions of that deck at a particular point? So that's one of the things I'm considering as well. But if some fantastic new deck or some fantastic old deck captures my attention that isn't relevant to any of those things, then I may stick in an impromptu deck walkthrough and review, as well as doing the ones that are relevant to my threads. Also, I am kind of conscious that I've got a fairly wide-ranging online presence, but it's not very coherent. So I'm active or active-ish on Twitter. I'm active-ish on Instagram. I've got my own personal Facebook profile and my coaching and writing Facebook profile. I have a tarot group that I run on Facebook. I have a blog, an online blog that I set up about 10 years ago when I was promoting my coaching practice at the time, and then that I used excuse me, that I used to promote my books that I wrote, and that has been kind of a bit dormant recently. I don't blog regularly, so it strikes me there's an opportunity for me to bring some of those things together a bit more coherently and weave that into what I'm doing in the channel. So that's something else I'm thinking of, looking at how I can make my blog and my online presence a bit more coherent. And I've got a really itchy nose, so excuse me. That's better. Let me have a sip of water. Can you hear, by the way, the wind whistling in the chimney? It's actually quite a mild night this evening, but it feels a little bit as though it should be, well, it's blustery outside, so it feels like it should be snowy and wintry. I love that kind of weather. So, yes, I'm looking forward to that when it comes. Anyway, I digress. So, where did we get to? Yes, the other thing is, in that blogging idea, and both for this channel and for my other online platforms, I'm thinking also about doing more in the way of a focus on reading and writing. And by reading, I mean reviewing the books that I'm reading. I read books in all different genre, fiction and non-fiction, and I would love to share some of those with you. And I've been thinking in the past that really I should niche some of my interests, and you know, some of the people who are interested in some of my interests, like tarot, are not going to be the same people who are interested in some of my other interests, like creative writing. And I thought maybe I should do different blogs and things for all of those. I've realised that is just, although it might be ideal because then I'm actually talking to a particular niche, it's just not possible because there's only one of me, and I have got a full-time job and I have a couple of part-time additional directorships that take up a bit of my time, and I'm trying to write this novel. The novel actually is coming on quite well. I haven't written it yet, but I've plotted it and I'm breaking it up into chapters. I'd hoped by now to have it done, at least in draft form, but circumstances this year have been such that that's not been possible. But anyway, that is something else I'll be talking about in the year ahead, both the writing of that novel and writing other things and reviewing things. So all of that could be woven in as well. So the plan is, if things go well, to consolidate my online platforms and give the channel a bit of a refresh, where you'll get some of the same stuff that you've had before and also a few new things. The big difference is going to be, and I'm afraid, excuse me 1 second, I'm going to have to blow my nose because it's just all stuffy. I really hope that I remember to edit that great big honking blowing of the nose out of this video, because it will not have been attractive. Anyway, so consolidate all my kind of online platforms and weave together all my different interests through those, and rather than do what I had done before, which is feel that I had to be very regimented in releasing things on a kind of regular and frequent pattern, you're basically going to get them when you get them, which is going to be when I can do them and when I have the motivation and enthusiasm to do them. And I think that that is coming back. I think the fact that I'm sitting here talking to you tonight shows that I am beginning to get that mojo back, which is good, which is great, in fact. And by way of closing, I think I'll just reflect on a bit about, and this is relevant to the whole kind of depth here conversation, a bit about how I'm feeling. Because this has been a difficult year for me for a number of different reasons. But it's also been a very enriching year. And so, you know, I said earlier that my depth year experience hadn't been entirely successful, and that's true in terms of the terms that I said, in terms of consumption of things. But in other ways, I don't think it could have been a deeper year. So, you may remember I shared with you that earlier in the year my dad was taken very ill with prostate cancer. I'm pleased to say he's doing really well at the moment, which is great. He's been through his treatment and has had some encouraging post-treatment results, which is great. But there's still a road to go. And so this year I've actually gone up and down to Scotland quite a few times and have been very glad to do it, and very grateful that I'm in a position to do it, and wouldn't change that for the world. But it has been quite tiring. Not just physically tiring, but emotionally tiring, of course. So that has been something that has taken me to interesting levels of depth in terms of my contemplation about life and the future and all kinds of things. And so that's been an interesting thing. Also all the stuff on the house, some of which has gone well, some of which has been very, very stressful, has also kind of taught me a lot about myself. So in that sense it has taken me to interesting depth. And also I have been very busy professionally, so my day job is going well, and as I say, I've taken on a couple of non-exec directorships which take up my time, and they've been quite a steep learning curve actually, because they're in areas that I wasn't overly familiar with, but I've thoroughly enjoyed. But that has taken up a lot of my time, and of course I'm trying to do the novel. So I found myself having to remind myself that I've only got so much bandwidth, and it's okay to let some things go, and also it's okay to stop and ask for help. One of the best lessons, and I might have shared this on this channel before, if not I'll share it again just in case you don't know, but one of the best lessons I've ever had was from one of my managers. When she saw that I was struggling. I was a trainee manager for a well-known retail firm and was giving the impression to everyone that I was on top of things, when in actual fact I was kind of drowning, and nobody else saw it because I was disguising it really well. The consequence being that they were piling more and more work onto me, and I was sinking deeper and deeper. Luckily, or due to her skill actually, she saw it in me and sat me down and said, "How are you feeling?" And of course I did the bravado thing of, "Oh yeah, I'm fine. And she kept penetrating and saying, "No, how are you really feeling? How are you really feeling?" And eventually she kind of cracked the shell, and I just went, "Oh, I'm not coping, help. And she gave me some great advice, which was basically that I needed to be more honest about how I was feeling, because that would be the way that I would, not only would I get the help that I needed when I needed it, but also it would mean that when people needed help from me in the future, they would know that I was somebody who understood where they were coming from and that I wouldn't judge them." So it was a hugely useful lesson to me, and it's one that I still try to live by to this day. So I'm recognizing in myself that I've had a challenging year, and I've had a very busy year. So it's no wonder I'm feeling a bit knackered. And my intention is to go into 2020 exploring things at more depth, but also giving myself permission to go at the pace that is right for me, because I would rather share with you quality material that takes a bit longer to get to you than shallower material that is just rushed out really, really quickly. A couple of you have asked, or more than a couple of you actually, have asked, by the way, if I would consider doing something like setting up a Patreon page. Yes, I would, but I'd have to be very clear that what I was giving my patrons was genuinely additional to what they get from me here, and I have no intention of ceasing to share quality, I hope quality and in-depth material here, because I enjoy doing it, and I don't do this because I want to make a buck, because I don't make a buck from this at all. You know, if through the process of doing it I, for example, promote my books and so on, and may well promote new books in the future, then great. But it's, you know, it's not an income stream for me at the moment or in the foreseeable future. But I would consider it if it meant that I had the opportunity and maybe a bit more time to go into things in even more depth. So I'm not saying no, never. I'm just saying that I'd need to consider it a bit more. So that really is, I think that's maybe all I need to say. Oh, there's one more thing that I'd like to share with you, and it kind of touches on the quality of material that I want to be able to share with you, because and this is where I'm coming from in terms of this self-directed spirituality idea and the mystical exploration idea. I feel a bit like I can either skirt around the whole kind of spirituality thing and do some of the nicey spiritual things that are, you know, sharing the latest tarot deck, or you know, sharing a nice kind of meditation or visualization exercise, all of which is valuable and all of which is good and perfectly fine if that's what you want. But also there's the opportunity to go deeper and to say, what if we were to take the opportunity to explore things with a mystical eye? What if we were prepared to take the opportunity to say, let's explore the depths of the ground of our being. Let's explore the connections between us and all of creation. Let's try and tap into an awareness of God, spirit, the universe, however you want to describe that. You know, let's take the opportunity to explore and see what the mystics saw. And is there an opportunity for us to do that through a process of exploration together, on this channel and in other media? And I think probably yes, there is. And just to give you an example of what made me feel that tapping into that connection is where it's at. A month or so ago, my partner and I went to Canada on holiday. And to be honest, I kind of didn't want to go, partly because things were so busy, the house was in a bit of disarray, I was worried about Dad, there was various things happening, and luckily my partner just kind of said, we're going, and pushed me into it in a nice way, which is what I needed. And so we went. And as soon as we planned that we were going to go, we went to Ontario for 9 days. As soon as we did that, as soon as we made the plans, I made a decision to try and do something that I have wanted to do for many years, and that is find a grave in Canada. Because before I was born, my parents lived in Canada for about 3 years, and then they moved back here, and a couple of years later I arrived. The reason they moved back is that while they were there, they were expecting a baby, and sadly, due to medical negligence, the baby died during the childbirth. And it was a little boy, he was a little boy, who would have been called Jason. And I first learned about Jason when I was about 4 or 5 years old. It must have been about 5, I was at school. And my mum told me about Jason, this baby that they had but who hadn't lived. So in my head, for ever since then, and I'm 46 now, so for over 40 years, in my head I've carried this, and in my heart, this idea of a little big brother that I never got to know. And I remember years ago thinking, if ever I get to Canada, I'm going to try and find where he's buried. So I asked my dad, my mum died many years ago, I asked my dad if he could direct me, and he said he couldn't really, because one, it was so long ago and he's not been back there since. This was like late 60s. He to some extent has tried to blot that part of his life out. Not that he's not remembered Jason, but that whole, the detail of where things are and so on, is not something he's dwelled on, understandably. And also, you know, they moved away very soon after the tragedy, so as he understood it, he wasn't even sure if there would be a headstone. He said he thought there might be a plaque of some sort. So I tried to find out, and I contacted the federal government in Ontario, the regional government, the local cemeteries. I tried all kinds of things. I phoned people, I wrote to people, I did online searches, and I kind of drew a blank. So as we were going to Canada, I kind of had resigned myself to not being able to find Jason. While we were there, we went to where Mum and Dad stayed when they lived there, which is a little town called Port Colborne. We were there for the first couple of nights. And while we were there, we went to this museum at Port Colborne. And one of the assistants in the museum was just lovely. She was very chatty and very friendly and very helpful. And she kept saying, you know, if there's anything I can help you with, just let me know. So I decided to try a bit of a long shot. And I said to her, I don't know if you can help me. And I told her the story. I said, I'm looking basically for my brother's grave. He was stillborn a couple of years before I was born. I don't really know any more than that. And I didn't really expect anything to come of it, but she said, well, I might be able to help you, or at least I know somebody who might. You should speak to Michelle in the archive team next door. She might know, and she actually helped me to find my great uncle who died in the flu epidemic of 1919. And I was like, wow, you know, that's very specific, but I'm not quite sure she's going to have the same kind of records for babies that didn't live in the late 60s. Anyway, I went to see this Michelle next door. She searched her records, didn't come up with anything, but she said, you could try the local funeral parlour. It's been operating here for over 60 years, so they may have dealt with the internment. So I went to the funeral parlour. My partner and I went to the funeral parlour and spoke to them there. They looked a bit doubtful, but said they would check their records, disappeared off for about 20 minutes, so I didn't really think they'd be coming up with anything. But they came back and said, we've got a record. We've got a record. And we know where the burial place is, and we know the cemetery. And we know the date and all that kind of stuff. So I was kind of amazed, delighted, but amazed. And so they said, go to the local township of Wainfleet, which is where the cemetery is based, and go to the town office and ask to speak to Connie, because Connie will be able to direct you exactly to where the site is. So I went to the township office, found Connie, started telling her the story, and she said, hang on a minute, you're Brian, aren't you? And I said, yes. She said, I got your email. Didn't you get my reply? So it turns out that I had actually emailed her office as part of my quest beforehand. And she had got the email and she had replied, but she'd replied from a different email address, so it had gone into my spam folder and I hadn't picked it up, although I had been searching the spam folder. Anyway, wasn't a problem. She printed off the stuff that she had sent, which basically was a map of specifically where his grave was. There was no marker. She said there would have been a marker on the day, but because my parents didn't stay, no headstone was ever erected. But we were able to find the exact spot. So we drove to the cemetery, we found the exact spot, and I was able to leave flowers and spend time there. And it was in a beautiful cemetery near the banks of Lake Erie, very peaceful. I was able to leave flowers. The first day it was brilliant sunshine, had great weather, and we went back on the last day that we were there as well, when it was a bit duller but still very beautiful. And we found a little stone nearby in a kind of little quarry that was nearby, I guess, near a field. And we put that where he was. It probably will have been moved by now when somebody cuts the grass, but that didn't matter. It was somewhere for me to lay flowers and to honour his memory and to honour my parents and to honour my promise that I had made, I guess, to myself and to his memory and to my mum's memory, that I would find him. And, you know, talk about depth. It was, as you can imagine, very moving. The whole process of going through that was very moving. Being there was moving. You know, standing there by his grave after 41-ish years of knowing about him but having no tangible physical connection, and actually being there was just amazing. And it was amazing to have the experience of all of those people helping and feeling as though it was like a chain that you know, that having that, I had an urge to ask the question in the museum. It was like a visceral feeling of ask her, even though it's unlikely she'll be able to help. Just ask her. I couldn't not ask her, and I asked her, and she directed me to somebody who directed me to somebody who directed me to somebody who directed me to the graveside. It felt as though something quite profound was happening, and it was a kind of set of synchronicities and a chain of generosities, all working together. And yeah, it made me feel very connected to Jason and to my parents and to my partner who helped me be there, and to all the other people who'd helped me, and to the land in Ontario, and the trees and the lake. It just all was profoundly humbling and moving, and a sense of connectedness. And it left me feeling that that's what I want to explore further in my video making for you, in my future writing, in my future creativity. And it's not going to be immediate, because I know I've still got some things to get through in order to clear the decks enough for me to be able to move forward with this. But I am moving towards it, and it will be on its way. And so it won't be before Christmas, it won't be before the new year, but when 2020 comes, watch this space, and I will be back. So that's it. And I guess it just leaves me to say to all of you, thank you again for being here for this year and for all your support and encouragement. And I look forward to sharing more with you in 2020. And I wish you, whatever you're doing now and whatever you have planned for the holiday season, however you choose to celebrate it, I wish you all the very best. What is it that Walter Mercado, that marvellous Latin astrologer who died just a month ago, mucho amor, lots and lots of love. Well, that's how he always ended his horoscopes, with that. Well, that's what I'm ending this with. I'm ending this with, from me to you, lots and lots of love. Take care. I'll see you soon. And lots and lots of love from Maya too. Yes, Maya, look, your fans. Mommy back. Mommy's sleeping. Oh, bless her. See you soon.